Previously on A Love That Lingered. Stranded in a remote town, Grace Everly sought shelter at Caldwell Manor, a grand estate with a tragic past. There, she met Oliver, the mysterious caretaker who spoke of the manor's history like a bedtime story told through shadows. But when night fell, Grace was no longer certain she was alone. This is Episode 2, Whispers in the Walls. The clock on her phone read 10:43 p.m. Grace lay stiff in bed, arms folded over the blanket, eyes fixed on the dark curve of the ceiling. Her body begged for rest after a day of travel, but her mind refused to settle. There was something about this place, something old and watchful, as if the walls themselves were listening. Rain ticked softly against the tall windows, and the occasional moan of the wind pressed against the glass like a breath that never quite got in. She sat up slowly. Maybe it was the damp, she reasoned, or the storm, or the fact that the fireplace hadn't been lit and the room had grown colder than expected. She wrapped a shawl over her shoulders and slipped quietly into the hallway. The manor was darker now, hushed, as though even the ghosts were sleeping. Her footsteps barely made a sound on the long rug as she padded to the end of the corridor, past faded wallpaper and antique sconces that hadn't flickered to life since dusk. She found a bathroom tucked between two guest rooms. Its walls were tiled in green and white, the mirror above the basin rimmed in tarnished brass. She splashed cold water on her face, counted her breaths, tried not to look too long into the glass. On her way back to her room, her fingers brushed the banister of the grand staircase. She peered down into the entry hall, just to be sure no one was wandering below. But it was still. The fire in the hearth had long gone out. She closed the door gently behind her, dried her hands, checked her phone again. 10:58 p.m. No new signal, still no bars. She opened her Maps app out of habit and searched nearby hotels. No results, just the little blue dot spinning endlessly at the edge of a forested road. She sighed. That was when she heard it. Faint, just outside her door. A low voice. At first, she thought it might be the wind. But then the voice came again, a whisper, then another. Grace's heart climbed into her throat. She crept toward the door, stocking feet silent on the hardwood. Pressing her ear to the panel, she barely breathed. It was Oliver. His voice was lower than usual, no longer charming or clipped, but frustrated. "Can't keep doing this," he murmured. There was a pause. Another voice answered him, deeper, edged with sorrow. It was impossible to tell what he said, only that it was said softly. Grace blinked. The words weren't fully clear, like hearing someone speak underwater, but the tone made her stomach twist. It wasn't friendly. "Don't," Oliver snapped, then quieter. "She doesn't know anything yet." Another reply, even more faint. Then nothing. She hesitated. Her hand hovered above the doorknob. She was the only guest. He'd told her so himself. So who had he been speaking to? Maybe it was someone from town, a cousin, a late arrival. But why would they argue in whispers? Before she could convince herself to go back to bed, she opened the door. Oliver stood in the hallway, only inches away, holding a small bundle of firewood in his arms. He looked surprised, but not startled. "Miss Everly," he said with a pleasant nod, "you're still awake?" Her voice caught, but she forced it steady. So are you. He gave a sheepish smile. Habit. The manor has a way of keeping one alert. I thought I'd bring up a bit of wood, in case the cold was keeping you up. She stepped back to let him in, unsure what else to say. He moved gracefully to the hearth, kneeling and stacking the logs with care. His movements were practiced, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Grace crossed her arms. I thought I heard you speaking outside just now. Oliver glanced over his shoulder. Yes, I apologize. I didn't mean to disturb you. Were you talking to someone? His pause was nearly imperceptible. There's no one here but you and I, he said lightly. Old houses echo strangely. You'd be surprised how easily the wind can sound like conversation. Grace hesitated. I could have sworn. You're not the first to think so. He offered a quiet chuckle as he struck a match. That's where the ghost stories come from, you know. Every creak and groan turns into a tragedy, makes the place more interesting. The fire crackled to life. Grace studied him. There was no fear in him, but also no lie she could point to. He was calm, gentle. But something in his posture was strained, like a man holding up more weight than he let on. Did Arthur really stay here after his wife died? She asked. He didn't turn around. Yes. And he never remarried? Oliver's fingers adjusted a log. No. She sat on the edge of the bed. You make it sound like she meant the world to him. She was his world, Oliver said softly. He just forgot how to live in it without her. The fire danced. Shadows moved across the walls. Grace looked down at her hands. She wasn't sure why the ache in his voice unsettled her so much. I'm sorry, she said. He stood and brushed off his vest. There's nothing to be sorry for, Miss Everly. None of this is yours to carry. But for some reason, it felt like it was. When Oliver left, the room was warmer, but Grace didn't feel it. She sat for a long time by the fire, watching the light flicker and pulse. Her thoughts churned, heavy and unformed. There's no one here but you and I, he'd said. Then why had she felt another presence in the hallway? Why did the manor hum at the edge of her senses, like a memory waiting to be recognized? She touched her phone again, just to hold something familiar. The signal was still dead. Even time felt strange now, as though the manor had swallowed it whole. And deeper still, she couldn't stop thinking about the voice she hadn't recognized. That low, aching voice that spoke like it had been asleep for 100 years and had only just remembered how to grieve. Later, Grace dreamed she was riding a horse through a snow-covered forest. The cold stung her cheeks. Her lungs burned. Behind her, someone shouted, a voice like thunder in the distance. She turned in the saddle to look back and saw the manor, not crumbling and aged, but new, golden lit, windows gleaming. A figure stood at the top of the stairs watching her go. She couldn't see his face, only that he didn't follow. She woke with a gasp, heart racing, the fire now long gone out. In the silence, a whisper curled through the chimney smoke. You came back.